All right, so we're going to start just barely, section 6.1. We're going to be talking about the set of rational numbers. And a fair bit of what we're going to be doing at the beginning of every chapter is really going to be vocab stuff, just to make sure that you and I are on the same page with how we're defining things. So to start with, we're going to look at fractions. A fraction is any number of the form a over b with b not equal to 0. So the a and the b can be any kind of number that we're working with. They can be whole numbers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They can be rational numbers, like they could actually have a decimal as the value, like 3.2. They could be radicals, like square root of 7. They could be like pi. So we've got lots of options for what kind of numbers we have. The numerator is what we call the value that's on the top of the fraction, and the denominator is the value on the bottom of the fraction. Now, fractions have this sort of a broad sense that a and b can be anything we want, with the exception of the 0 in the denominator. Rational numbers are a little bit more defined, though. Specifically, the a and the b have to be integers, okay? So they can only be positive or negative whole numbers, and again, with 0 not on bottom. So the other thing that can happen is that you could have like a decimal on top or a decimal on bottom, but you have the ability to change the form so that it's an integer over an integer, and that would also be a rational number. Okay? We have 4 basic uses of rational numbers that we're going to talk about. The first one is a solution. So a solution is something where we're solving equations and integers aren't sufficient. So you have equations like 2x equals 1. Well, x equals 0 would give me 2 times 0 is 0, and x equals 1 would give me 2 times 1, which is 2. I need something between 0 and 1 to be the value for x. Well, that necessitates a rational number that's not an integer. So we have things that are solutions. Second example is, second use is a partition. An example of a partition is something like 1/4 of my paycheck goes to gas. And these days it might be more like 1/2. Gas costs, man. Yeah, so it's a portion, a partition of something, right? So we're talking about it in terms of being a portion. Ratio is another one. So you see ratio all the time in education. This is an example of one. The teacher-student ratio. Is, 1 to 12 or 1 to 20, right? It's how many teachers there are per students. In fact, if you go out and you look on college websites, that's usually a point of like benefit at a small college, is they'll say something like the teacher-student ratio or the student-teacher ratio, depending on how they describe it, is 1 to 14. For every 14 students on campus, there's one faculty member. That doesn't mean all your classes are that size, but it gives you some kind of an idea of how many faculty there are for the number of students at a school. But we use it all the time in, K-12 education as well, right? And there are requirements and there are state, laws and stuff that tell you what these have to be. The last one is probability. So here's an example of a use of probability. So when you roll a die, just a standard die, you have 1 out of 6 probability of rolling a 5. 1/6 chance, right? There's 6 sides to the die. One of them is a 5, so it's a 1 out of 6 chance. The likelihood of something to happen. So these are our 4 basic ways that we think about probability, or think about rational numbers: solution, partition, ratio, and probability. I think that we're just going to stop there, and we'll start and pick up with the examples next time so that we can do all 4 of them together.